standardized testing have a language all of its own. I'm Dr. Emily Sherwood. If you're interested in education and literacy from a global perspective, please like and subscribe. So, if you have a young person or in your life, and that young person attends public school, the odds are that child's going to be taking a standardized test pretty soon, if that hasn't started already, because it's testing season in the United States. The very end of the year is when everyone takes standardized tests. And there's a lot of accommodations for these tests, especially for English learners and for students with special educational needs. The tests are often read aloud. They're given extra time usually. And in extreme cases, there's even a scribe, which means that someone writes for the student. But none of those accommodations address something that is very common, and that is that standardized testing has a language all to itself. So there are only a handful of states, I'm thinking 2 or 3, that have tests available in other students' native languages, mainly in Spanish. And in those states, those students often don't know the language in their home language because we don't use a lot of words, their own standardized tests in everyday language. So even in those states where the students are able to test in their native language, they often don't know these words. And the words that are often used in standardized testing that are not used in everyday language, but are not really scientific or academic words, are called Tier 2 words. And it was interesting when I worked overseas, in some cases, and this was true with many teachers I talked to, in some cases, students that were learning English actually knew the academic words, which are called Tier 3 words, the words that you use for biology. Like, for example, a biology test, you would have cell, reproduction, mitosis, meiosis. They knew all of those words, but they didn't know the Tier 2 words, and because of that, they had a very difficult time passing the end of the year test. Many states do offer bilingual dictionaries. I think that's pretty standard. But again, you have to open the dictionary, you have to find the word. If the word's not there, you're just out of luck, and you have to use a paper dictionary in most cases. And also, you may not have learned that word in your home language unless you're in some kind of bilingual program. It's the same problem as being tested in the home language. Unless you've had instruction in that language, you're not going to know these words. So if you're a parent who is teaching a child who's an English learner, you've got English learners in your classes, or you're just a parent who's maybe a native English learner, but your child is struggling on standardized tests and you can't figure it out because the child is doing okay in the classroom. This is a possible reason, because standardized testing has a lot of advanced language that isn't used in everyday life. I'm just going to go over a few of these words today that are most commonly used, and in the description box, I'm going to put links to a lot of words. So if you're working with a child who's about to take a standardized test, it may be helpful for you to go over some of these words, and that might help the child to also feel more comfortable. So here are some words that you might see in a standardized test. Text, T-E-X-T, is a piece of writing. It can mean a book, but it could also be something like an article, or it could be a paragraph explaining something. It can be a speech. Anything that's in writing is a text, and you'll definitely see that in the test. Analyze is to look at something carefully. So for example, they might tell you, analyze the poem for what the author's message is. That's a pretty common thing. Or analyze this problem if you're doing a math test, to discover what's wrong with this problem. Where did the person have a problem with it? Then we have infer, and this is such an important skill that unfortunately a lot of students don't have, and it's especially hard for English learners because it's not an easy skill. But it is so important and it helps the students so much. So to infer is to make an educated guess based on the information you have. So for example, they may have a passage that says, this is very, very elementary, but there may be a passage that says, Sandy was sad, she had to stay inside. The teacher said that it wasn't safe to go outside, and she just looked out the window and looked at the water, and tears went down her face as well. Just made that up. But you could infer there that it's raining outside, because you know that you can't go outside, you know that there's water outside, and usually if there's water coming from the sky, it's raining. And it might make children sad who can't go outside to play. That's just an example. Inference is so important, and I often see that with struggling readers, it's been overlooked somewhere. They just haven't been taught it. To compare means to find the things that are the same. So for example, they might say, compare these two pictures if you're in a social studies class. What's alike about them? That's what it's asking. What is it alike? And the test may have the pictures from maybe the Civil War, and you can say, oh, well, it may be a picture of two objects. This is true in biology tests a lot. Like there's two organisms. There's one that's maybe an octopus. We like octopuses in my house. So there's a jellyfish. We also like jellyfishes. There's a song about jellyfishes. So they might give you a diagram, which is like a chart, and it has all the parts labeled. And you have to say, okay, well, the octopus has arms, has 8 arms. And the jellyfish has a lot of arms, but it's not always 8, and the arms may not have bones in them. Contrast is how things are different. Which means, for example, contrast, this might be a science question, contrast mitosis and meiosis. There are 2 different processes that have to do with cells, and you have to say how they're different. Often a question in English will ask you to compare and to contrast, which means to find what is alike and what is different. Main idea is the main point of a passage. So they're looking for what the author's saying, the main thing the author's saying. And the details are the things that support that. So for example, if you're reading, let's say, an argumentative essay, an essay that's trying to persuade you about something. In history, there are a lot of essays. So let's say you're reading an essay about women's rights, because in this country, women did not have the right to vote until 1920. And let's say you're reading an essay about that. And the main idea is women should have the right to vote. The details are women do work, women are important in society, women are just as intelligent as men. Those are all details. To summarize is to give a concise or a smaller version of the text. So, for example, there may be one page, and it has all this text that's written, and they say, give a summary. What is the best summary? If it's a multiple choice test, which most standardized tests are, there are some that are starting not to be. But if it's a multiple choice test, what is the best summary of this? And you have maybe 4 answers, and one of them is basically what this is about. So it's asking you if you could find the main idea, basically, and take a big thing and make it smaller. And then the theme is the big idea, often found by inferring. And it's often moral teaching or an emotion. So if I have anybody out here watching who is into fables, for example, Aesop's fables, those are stories with animals, and the theme is always the moral, what happens at the end. So to stay safe, that's a very common theme. And there are lots of different cultures who have these. I know in the most Latin American cultures, you tell stories that have a lesson. That lesson is the theme. Now, in more advanced literature, the themes may be a little bit more complex. For example, something you might read in high school. There might be complex themes. For example, a theme might be love. A theme might be compassion or kindness. Show kindness. I think maybe greed. If you're reading a book and it's got a character who's really selfish and bad things happen, that's greed. So that's the theme. I've just gone over a few of the most common ones here. This is not a whole list, but I am going to put a list in the description. And what are your questions about standardized testing and how you can prepare your child? Do you have questions about that? Is it something that's a little bit scary for you? Is it confusing? Anything that you might have, any questions you might have, please put that in the description. Please put that as comment. And then I will get back to you about that, because this is an important time for children, and children and families need to be prepared and to know, have as much information as possible to do this and to succeed, and also to be calm and understand what's going on, because standardized testing can be confusing. So that's all I have for today. Until next time, keep learning, and please like and subscribe. Thank you.